Hello and welcome to another video, and thank you so much. We hit 6,000 subscribers which is absolutely crazy. I think when I was about to hit 5,000 I said, or when I hit 5,000 I said it'd be next target be 7,000, and that YouTube or Social Blade said I wasn't going to hit it for like another 3 years or something like that. Now we've hit 6,000 this quick. I wonder how long it'll be till 7,000. But again, thank you all, and thank you to everyone who's joined the membership. There's some videos coming up that I'm working on for you, but I appreciate every single one of you that has subscribed and hit the like button. And it's been absolutely brilliant, and I've taken on board, yes, you like the Timeslips stories. Yes, I've read all the comments. I haven't been able to reply to everyone. I'm trying to, I'm getting through them, but also know that you still want the ghost stories. Today I've got a combination of both. So, taking on board what you said, I know the Timeslip ones, you love them. Got St James's Park. And St James's Park has got a mixture of dark history, ghost stories, time slips. And I think you can enjoy it. It may be a longer video, but I went there yesterday and it was a bit wet. It's got worse. It was really hot. Then it chucked it down. Then it was really hot again. Then it chucked it down, and I ended up walking 10.5 miles, and I had really soggy feet at the end of the day. I got home, and they weren't a pretty sight, my feet. Not blisters, they just looked like I sat in a bath for 12 hours. It was just terrible. Don't want to know about my feet. different video channel. But you're going to like this one, okay? It's got a lot of details of history. I hope so. I may muck it up. But if you like history, you like your time slips, you like your ghosts, this one's for you. So here we go. So we're actually going to start off with the most modern ghost for St James's Park. And these sightings started happening in 2008 and 2010. And this is at West Island. Now if you go to Buckingham Palace and you look over to St James's Park, you'll see there's loads of different islands. This is the island closest to Buckingham Palace, called West Island. And some people started seeing weird things. So on one report we have in 2009, we have a group of tourists that are walking around the edge of Buckingham Palace and looking over to the park, and this is around about 10 o'clock at night, and it was dark. They said they see a glowing figure on West Island, and they believed themselves that they'd seen a ghost. Not much went on about it. They didn't make a big fuss about it. All this stuff becomes relevant later on. And a few months later, a jogger was running along through St James's Park. He came to the end by West Island, went up along the top by Buckingham Palace and looked down as he was jogging along. As he looked down, he see what he thought was a shape moving around on West Island. As he runs this route quite a lot, it was something he wasn't used to seeing, so he stopped and had a look. He came to the conclusion that it was a pelican or a swan that was in the bushes down there. But what he described was a bit weird because he said it was glowing. So again, we've got two reports of this glowing figure just on West Island. But just like the first report, thought nothing more of it and just carried on. In 2010, we get a group of people that are round by Buckingham Palace late of the evening. They're taking photos of each other, and as they're doing so, they're leaning up against the wall and they're looking down over St James's Park. They all see what they believe to see a figure moving around in the bushes. Now they describe this figure about the size of a man, but not knowing the area at all, they thought maybe it was just someone looking after the grounds and doing this sort of stuff. So they just thought it was interesting to see a staff member going onto the island. This comes into rather a serious thing that happens in 2011. In 2011, the groundsman goes over to check West Island. Now the island's not checked that often, as it's been left alone for wildfowl. They only actually go onto island every 2 years. This one may have slipped that, it may have been 3 years or even 4 years before it was last checked. When the groundsman went onto the island checking the trees, he found a human skeleton. This was a skeleton of Robert James Moore. And he was actually an American tourist. Well, he was actually American, I don't know if he was a tourist, because he was infatuated with the Queen. And in 2007, he boarded a plane, come over to England, and after 15 years of sending weird stuff to the Queen, letters, photos and all this sort of stuff, he took up a camp on West Island. How he got there, no one knows. But he passed away on that island. When they found his skeleton in 2011, they said that he'd been dead for at least 3 years. And that was also because he went to the American embassy during that time, and that was the last time he was ever seen. But also, when they examined the skeleton, they said it had been there at least 3 years. Who was being seen on that island? Was this the ghost of Robert James Moore? Once the skeleton was found, these sightings disappeared. It didn't happen for many, many years. Until 2021, when again, people were saying they could see this figure out on the island. I'm going to take the last ones with a pinch of salt, because they know that somebody was found dead there. Are they jumping on the older bandwagon? I did have a very interesting conversation with the park warden about paranormal stuff yesterday. I hope when I look back at the filming that you may be able to see him. He was actually out along the grass and the flowers at the top end by Duck Island, and he had a puppy with him that he was trying to train. It was adorable. But when we were talking about paranormal stuff, he said that obviously he's there late at night, and he does Hyde Park as well late at night. He does see some really strange things that are really disturbing in that area, but they're not of the ghost kind. He said the nightlife is something you should see, or perhaps you shouldn't see. So yeah, it was interesting getting his take on it. He says a lot of people go on ghost walks around there with tour guides, and he hears what they're told and walks away thinking, what a load of made up baloney. He used a different word. But yeah, so you got to take those sort of stories with a pinch of salt. I told him my stories, and he said that they sort of fit in. He'd heard of them, and they were sort of like the myths and legends of the area. So they're not the made up fabricated ones that the tour guides tell you. So as we go on, I hope you're going to enjoy these. And I'm going to tell you the Timeslip one next, okay? So you're waiting for the Timeslip story, and I'll do that one next for you. So like the last video, this Timeslip story is sort of based around World War II. And on the 18th of June 1944, a VIII rocket struck Wellington Barracks Chapel when all the King's Guard were in there praying. This led to the death of 121 people, one of the biggest disasters during World War II in Britain. That chapel wasn't rebuilt till 1960, and during that period of time the land was derelict. Then we have 2 Welsh Guards, and the Welsh Guards come up a bit later on as well. We have 2 Welsh Guards that come down, and they're actually at a different barracks, but they've come over to Wellington Barracks to do some remedial work over there. They enter the grounds of Wellington Barracks. The first thing they see is this chapel. They walk over to the chapel and they're looking around it. They go inside, and when they're inside, they see it is full of people there having a service. They sit down as respectful. They enjoy the service. People get up and leave. When they walk back out, from being midday, it was now early evening. Yet they only felt as if they'd been in there sort of 20 minutes, if that. But this time had gone. They walked back over thinking they're going to get in trouble now because there's only been over there and they haven't done what they're meant to be doing. They went back out, got the stuff they was meant to be handing over, went back in, and when they went back into that area, it was barren. The chapel wasn't there. And it's just this flattened land with barriers up around certain areas, and they're looking at each other and they just can't work this out. What makes this even more strange, this was in 1951. 9 years before the chapel was rebuilt and 6 years after it got demolished by the bomb. There wasn't a chapel there. They said, and why do I class this as a time slip and not a ghost story? So the environment around them changed, so they were totally engaged in the stuff that was going on, which makes it completely different from a ghost story. Now, a ghost story is when you see a vision of something, but the environment around you doesn't really change. Here, they walked in, they sat down in the chapel, see a service and left. What they did not describe, which I find is a little bit strange, is that there's no sense that they were in the wrong time zone. Not like what happens next. So again, in 1955, we have a civilian in that area doing some work. He finds himself over by the chapel site, sees the chapel, goes in, and again sees these people around the area. They're all sitting there praying. He comes back out, but he comes back out and stands over to the side as all these people start filtering out of the chapel. Then he picks up his stuff and he walks out onto Burage Walk and then walks over to St James's Park. As he gets to St James's Park, he takes a bit of a breath. What he sees in St James's Park was a bit weird. The park is lined with all rusty metal, railings, old baths, and all this sort of stuff. He's really puzzled because he hasn't seen the park like this. It's a complete mess. Now there's just like lines and lines of all these metal railings and all that around. He turns back round to walk back up Burage Walk. He's still thinking about the strange mess that the park has gotten into, when all of a sudden in front of him he said it was more like a shimmer or electrical bolt that went through his body. And when he looked back round, everything in that park was back to normal. He's turned around and he's thinking, okay, I'm going to explore this a bit more. So he went back along where he had just walked. He retraced his steps. All those baths, all those metal had all gone. The park was back to normal. He walked back up to Wellington Barracks. And when he got there, he see the land that he had walked on where the chapel was just fenced off. He wouldn't have been able to get on there without going through a different entrance. This is completely bizarre because you've got an environmental change, the situation changed. He walked off. Now, it's the first time I've come across someone saying about this electrical bolt as like something changed. It's like a shimmer, and the shimmer was through his body. So these time slips, are they something that you experience within your body? Is it something in your mind that is triggering them? Did he know the history of that? We don't know that. We don't know if he knew the history of that place. Now, he was a civilian. I would say he probably had more knowledge than the Welsh Guards, who probably come down, didn't know nothing about the history of the area. Did this guy start imagining stuff like that? But we do have these two time slips that both linking to this chapel still remaining and those servicemen in there praying, and yet that is during that period of time when it was completely flattened. Now that chapel, the new chapel, is built in memory of those people that died there. What we need to add to this is that he was also correct about St James's Park. That St James's Park during World War II was used as a collection point for all old metal. So metal railings, old baths, this was all collected to help the war effort. So he has also seen that side of this time slip. It was also had air raid shelters dug into St James's Park at that time, which would explain why the park looked such a mess. Also, on a side note, during World War I, they actually drained St James's Park. The lake was drained out because they believed that the Zeppelins that were coming over were going to be able to use the reflection of the moon or whatever in the water as a guide to bomb London. At the same time they drained the lake, they used that area to put up temporary military buildings to help the war effort. So the St James's Park has got a lot of history when it comes to World War I and World War II. Right, now it's this next one I'm going to tell you, a time slip or a ghost, because it's a little bit of in the middle. So we've got in 1976 and 1995, a glowing man with a tricorn hat has been seen at Wellington Barracks. The difference on this is that when he's been seen, there seems to be some environmental changes there as well. So this is, as you look at Wellington Barracks from Burage Walk, as you look through, you've got this smaller tank there. He is said to be seen standing just over the side, just past where that tank is. The people that have described seeing him turn around and say that when they view him, the area around him is different as well. So instead of the concrete and the paving stones and all that, they say they see complete loads of gravel around him, and he's walking along as if he's going to go through a doorway that isn't there. This is why I'm confused. Could this be a time slip? Because I don't ever see reports of a ghost where other things around them change as well. They're in that environment. So, if you've got a ghost of, say he was a modern ghost, just say he was a ghost for the sake of it. So he was a ghost, you'd expect him to be walking along or floating along the concrete or the paving stones, not walking through gravel that has just appeared out of nowhere. Does that make this a time slip? Put your thoughts in the comments about that, because for me, that is more of a time slip than a ghost story. Don't get me wrong, Wellington Barracks has got a lot of ghost stories. So we've got the ghost of the Pale Lady. Now this is a young lady that is said to have starved to death in one of the houses along Wellington Barracks. She is regularly seen by soldiers in those barracks. Now this isn't just a one-off report, this is something that's been seen over years and decades, a reoccurring ghost. Then we have the Headless Lady, which we're actually going to leave that till a bit later, because there's a bit of confusion with the Headless Lady, and we sort of know who she was and the people who see her, so we're going to leave that till a bit later. But also some guards from Wellington Barracks turned around and said that they see a horse running through St James's Park when St James's Park looked completely different, no trees there. They see a horse all gowned up with a knight on its back riding through the park with a lance as if it is jousting. Believe it or not, Henry VIII used to use St James's Park, it wasn't really a park back then, for jousting. This land is centuries old, so from the 1300s it was like a marshland, and it was really built up for the leper colony that was over the other side where St James's Palace is, and that was a female leper colony, and that is where the bit of land was given for the parkland where they could go for a walk. And it was Henry VIII come in after they'd been there 350 years. He kicked them out because he liked the land, and he started transforming that area to breed deer so he could go off and move them off and hunt them. So, Henry VIII has a lot of responsibilities, but I guess in this case, he gave us St James's Park. As you walk through St James's Park, you'll come across a bridge. Now, this has got blue railings. That bridge has got a dark history, and darker than what you may think to start off with. So we'll go back to the history of that bridge. So in 1814, Napoleon had just been defeated in what we thought was his last battle, but obviously he come back. And to celebrate it, they built a bridge across James's Lake, which still was a lake canal type thing at the time. And they made a Chinese pagoda. Now this was 7 stories tall. It was massive. It was meant to be a great big celebration. And inside that pagoda, they put loads and loads of fireworks. Minutes before the event was meant to happen, the pagoda caught fire and it all collapsed. Now the bridge survived, but it actually killed 2 people. This adds to where we get to the ghost stories. So people will tell you that when they walk along that bridge, sometimes they hear the cries and the screaming of people in distress. Now they're looking around and they can't see anybody. Over the years, people have actually called the police to come and look as if someone may be in the water, but no one's ever found. Other people said they're walking along through St James Park, they look over and they describe people in sort of really old sort of dress, literally from the 19th century, that would fit into that time period of these people dying at that event. That bridge has also got a dark history when it comes to the Cold War. So during the Cold War, that bridge was used for the spies to meet. And you heard the Bridge of Spies, it's not quite that, but the Blue Bridge was a common meeting place for spies during the Cold War, where they exchanged secrets. Some people believe that some spies may have lost their life there. We're not going to know the truth about that, but there was a rumour that the ghost story about a man in a trench coat, you can see my disbelief over this one. A man in a trench coat is being seen being thrown over the railings and then the images disappear. I take that with such a pinch of salt that I wasn't even going to put it into this video, but it's out there, so I've included it. The park has gone over many changes over the centuries. So originally, as I said, it was a marshland, and there used to be a rotten canal running through it. And the only sort of water feature there was a pond, and that's called the Rosman Pond. So we're going back to sort of like 1750 when this pond was there. Now it was probably there well before that. But that pond was meant to be for where lovers would meet at that pond. But it also had a dark history of bodies being found in that pond. And many put it down to people taking their own lives. This is where we get into a bit of confusion over the next ghost story. So what we have is a Welsh guard called George Jones in 1804. He is on guard. Now he's either there or on Horse Guards Parade. So this is where we get the confusion coming in. And he said he sees a headless woman rise out of the lake or pond, and she's wearing a cream dress with red stripes and red spots on it. She was meant to walk along the ground past the pond before disappearing back into the ground. Now his account was so descriptive and it shocked a lot of people. This was seen again and again and again, but he was the first person to report it. Got so much so that the police got involved over this, and they launched an investigation into who this lady could be that was haunting the barracks or the grounds of St James's Park. Due to the description of the dress, and when it got made public, people recognised that description of the dress. They turned around and said, Sir Richard Ford, his wife has been missing, and she owned a dress just like that. They went to Richard Ford, and he admitted that he'd done his wife in and dumped her in the pond or a lake. He went on trial and got hung for this, but we only have George Jones, who seen the ghost, started all this off. Is this the first time where a ghost comes back, or we know other reports of that in history, but the first time here where we've got a ghost come back and solving their own murder? It is fascinating. Now, bizarrely enough, only a few years ago, a taxi driver was driving down Burage Walk when he said walking across the road was a headless woman. So this vision is quite apt, really. Other people will tell you that it's actually the lake end by Duck Island, and they were looking from Horse Guards Parade, looking across that area where they could see the lake, and she raised out of the lake from that side. But whatever it is, we have this lady appearing out of a pond or a lake with no head, walking across the road in front of a taxi driver. I shouldn't laugh. It's just, that's the other thing, I keep getting moaned at. So I film on my phone, okay, so I look here, and I know the camera lens is over here. People go, look at the camera, look at the camera. I do try. Look, I'm looking at the camera now. Is that about? But it's because my camera's so close to me. It is literally a tiny movement between them that changes from there to there. And so, but now I keep thinking about it, I keep going like that, and I'm like, you thinking I'm going boss-eyed when my eyes keep going like that all the time. But I've picked it up in my comments. I do read my comments, you see. I do read all of them. And some of your Timeslips stories are absolutely brilliant. Let me know, how would you feel about me doing a video just on your Timeslips stories? Because some of them are just incredible. And they link up to experiences I've had, not really of Timeslips, but there's one I was reading today about the Highlands of Scotland, where they're going up and down the dips and the hills, and they see an old-fashioned car go down, but it never comes back up again. And I love that sort of type of ones, and those sort of stories. But you've sent loads in that I love, and yeah, if you ever want me to do a viewers stories, I'm well up for that. You know, I'm guided by you, as you can tell, so I keep doing these Timeslips videos. I've got some really good ones coming up, actually. I've got some more spooky ones, and I've got some really good Timeslips stories, so I hope you're going to enjoy that. But anyway, we can get back to St James's Palace. We're getting back to St James's Park, but more actually, we can get back to St James's Palace, because St James's Palace has got a really dark history. Now, I do know that some royals still live at St James's Palace, so they're going to start hating me for this one. But St James's Palace is an old building. As you know, it was the site of the leper colony. So it was the leper hospital for females. So to start off with, Henry VIII kicks them out, builds his palace around it, and it looks stunning, absolutely stunning. He built it for Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn never got to see it. She was separated from her head before she got to visit that place. But Henry VIII still used it as somewhere he could go, and you know, his deers were growing out in the fields and the park. But over the years, people have said to hear the crying sounds of women in that building. Now it's not a massive jump, is it, to say this is haunted by people that used to be at the lepers. It was the lepers that haunt this. But there is a darker thing that happened, and that is in 1810. Now, I've got to keep this YouTube friendly, but Joseph Selis, who's a valet to the Duke of Cumberland, he was found dead in his bedroom. And the description of what happened to him were rather gross. He had a slice across his neck, and there was a lot of red liquid everywhere. From that day on, people will say that Joseph Selis haunts St James's Palace. Not only is he seen walking the corridors, and I guess because this is how it's written, this is the description of people inside St James's Palace who wrote this, holding his neck, spraying red liquid everywhere, walking through the palace. It's like the most dramatic ghost ever. It's just, oh, I love it. It's brilliant. But one story says he gave the maid such a fright that she passed out. It's like, oh. Do you know what reminds me of? No, Harry Potter, when John Cleese's character nearly headless Nick and his head flops back. Or Ghosts, when got the bloke carrying his head under his shoulder all the time. But yeah, brilliant. But outside St James's Palace, and I'm walking through the archways here, so you can see I'm walking through those archways. Some people have said back in the 1920s he was seen coming out those doors and walking down the street holding his neck, spraying red liquid everywhere. I'm going to take a minute. I've sorted myself out. Okay, we ready to continue? I'm going to start again. I can't. Moving on. Moving on, Charles I. Now, Charles I was kept prisoner in St James's Palace. Now, he hated St James's Park, and he let it go to ruin. On his final day of being executed, he asked to go for a walk in the park. And they took him for a walk in the park. Not only that, take him for a walk in the park. That sounds ominous anyway, doesn't it, really? But no, when the time came for his execution, they marched him through the park, up through now what is Horse Parade, and through the doors of Horse Parade. On the tower up there, there's a mark by the number 2, and that is to signify 2 o'clock of when he lost his head. But the ghost of Charles I is meant to be seen walking either outside the Pall Mall side of St James's Palace, walking along the building that way, but also through the archways that the public can still walk through today, through there onto St James's Park and up towards Horse Parade. Now, it's not a very common reported ghost, and to be truthful, this will fade out around about before World War One, so not many sightings have been seen of him in the park since then. But through the archways of St James's Palace, definitely there have been reports of people catching glimpses of a glowing figure walking through those archways, and people will tell you that it's either Joseph Selis, but if he ain't doing his special effects and he's walking along in nice clothing, it's going to be Charles I. So again, it's a really haunted location. More people that have worked there, the servants, are more concerned with the laughing and the crying of women that they hear. So during their time of service at St James's Palace, once they've been there, they come out and they talk. They turn around and say that they'd often hear this laughter and crying of people who were no longer alive. They'll be sitting there in their quarters, they can hear this laughing coming from literally beneath their feet. There's nothing under there, it's just a completely empty room. They know no one is around, and they know who's in the palace at the time. So these are your typical haunted building sort of ghosts, where you're hearing laughter, you go to investigate, and nobody's there. As their servants, and they're of a royal palace, I think you've got to give them a little bit of credibility. I don't think if I had such an important role, I'd lie about what I hear, especially in today's world when so many questions do come up about certain members of the royal family. I'm not getting political. It's not political, we're royal family. I support the royal family. I do, actually. I do. I'm very British, very English, very patriotic. Probably to a fault sometimes. Defending our country when we shouldn't really. I'm going to stop. But anyway, moving on. So our last ghost is Cedric, the wandering ghost. So Cedric is meant to be a young soldier, a young guard, who lost his life, and he's meant to haunt Wellington Barracks, St James's Park, and Horse Parade. Now, he lost his life in 1840, and he's said to haunt that area since 1840. Over the years, he's probably the most common seen ghost of that park. He's very descriptive in his clothing, so the outfit at the time is typical British military outfit. He's very, very pale. People who see him say that he's not a solid figure, that you can see through him. But he's meant to haunt the barracks regularly. Even today, people say they see him walking through where the chapel was and where the new chapel is, and walking through to where Scotland Yard is, because Scotland Yard wasn't there at the time, and over to where St James's station is. So he haunts right across the area, right away over to St James's Palace. Why does this person haunt such a wide area? It's mainly because he's so descriptive, and his pale complexion, that he's almost like transparent, that people see him, and he's got this really sorrowful face. And that is the most common report we have, is this really sorrowful face, as if No, he's in so much distress, not crying, but he looks distressed. Not much is known about his actual death. They don't know if this is a war death or anything, but we don't even know Cedric is his real name. This is a name given to him by British soldiers in Wellington Barracks. But when they've been out on guard, they've seen him over there and they recognise him from the ghost from the barracks. There's one story in one of the processions from Buckingham Palace that the horses were going along the mall and they reared up, and the guards that are riding the horses turned around and said it's because Cedric was standing in the middle of the mall. So I love that. You know, especially if you ever see that now, you can think, oh, was that Cedric? Other people will say that when someone tried to shoot the Queen on the mall, that it was Cedric that controlled her horse. Now we know that was blank firing, but it was, no, the Queen showed great horsemanship in controlling the horse and not getting reared off. But people say that if Cedric was there holding the reins of the horse, protecting her. Love that story, think it's brilliant. But Cedric is haunting all this area. While we're on this one, here's a little time slip for you as a bonus feature. Right? So, as you know, when we have these big military events, you know, jubilees, weddings and funerals, the horse guards go out late at night, early hours of the morning, and do practice runs of what they've got to do the next day for the show. And they'll be doing this for weeks actually. So, you know, early hours of the morning, they'll be getting up, going out and performing these events. One troop were coming down past Wellington Barracks when they see a load of soldiers standing on the side of Burage Walk watching them. They all describe them as around the 1940s type soldiers. That falls into the 1944 VIII bomb. What makes it a time slip? I can't think of it being a ghostly apparition. This many people standing there watching, interacting with what they're seeing. This isn't a ghost, but you're watching them doing something, you know. You're not watching this ghost doing something. These soldiers are watching them parade down Burage Walk at 3 o'clock in the morning. I find that fascinating. Now, and again, this isn't something that isn't repeated. People have said they've seen these soldiers there again when they're doing these dry runs. It's not often military people will talk about stuff. When they do, I guess you've got to take it more seriously. I loved investigating St James's Park. I have filmed other locations in London while I was there yesterday. Went to a very haunted pub and the bar staff there were great, told me a bit of information, and walking around, I didn't get into some of the buildings I wanted to get into. Some of them you can't, but I'll work around that. I've got some East End ones coming up again. I've got some Lake District ones, I've got some camping ones, got some Scotland ones, got one in Wales, Northampton. I've got loads coming up. If you continue to support me and, you know, keep liking and keep those subscriptions coming in, I'll keep going. I'll just keep knocking them out. I'll keep putting the videos out. Sounds really common, doesn't it? But again, thank you all for your support, all your kind words, and I'll get the viewing out right eventually. I want to upgrade my microphone as well. You don't really know what this looks like. It is falling apart, but we'll get in there. Anyway, thank you, take care, and this one goes out on Tuesday, and I'll see you again on Friday. I may try and do a live stream sometime as well, but if not, I'll see you on, well, you'll see me now when you're watching this, and then you'll see me again on Friday. Okay, take care, see you soon, bye.